What's going on, y'all? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. Today on Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit, I'm going to take like 4 requests and put them together in one. Math. It's a thing that is part of the contract of a TTRPG. Generally speaking, when we show up at a table, we show up with the understanding we're going to put numbers together, enter sacred geometry and arithmancy. I don't know who was responsible for their entry in Occult Mysteries, but here we are. How to do more math in your math-intensive Pathfinder 1st Edition game for, in fact, fun and profit. Remember, if you're liking what you're seeing, to like, subscribe, ding the bell, stay caught up on all your stuff. For now, let's dive in. Okie doke, so before we can discuss the mechanics, we gotta, as we always do in this house when we're playing Pathfinder, talk about the origins. On planet Earth, arithmancy is a form of divination which is based on assigning numerical value to a word or phrase. When applied to, for example, a person's name, it is used to predict the strengths and weaknesses in a person. You essentially place a number on a given You essentially place a value on a given letter. If the result is greater than 9, you boil down until you get the single digit. Sacred geometry is the belief that everything that we see present day was created by an all-knowing, all-powerful God. And because an all-powerful God created the universe according to a geometric plan, we can find signs of said plan throughout the world. The Fibonacci spiral comes to mind here. Things like repeating squares or circles, so on and so forth, based upon the culture which we are drawing from. In Pathfinder, both of these are feats. Arithmancy requires an intelligence of 13, spell-focused divination, and 3 ranks in spellcraft. To use arithmancy, you spend a swift action immediately before casting a spell. You determine the digital root of the spell based upon yonder table. Sum the digits until you land on a single number. So like in a universe where you land on 23, it feels appropriate to bring Jim Carrey into this video. You would then add 2 and 3 and hacha, you have a 5. Once you derive the number, you attempt a spellcraft check with a DC equal to 10 plus the spell level plus the number you just derived. If the check succeeds, the spell is cast at +1 caster level. Should you fail, it's cast at -1 caster level. If you do not cast the spell you intended to augment, the spell is expended with no effect, though you retain the action you would have spent to cast it. So you burn the spell slot, but have a hypothetical move and standard action. That's the easy one. Sacred geometry requires an intelligence of 13, I think we're seeing a pattern, and 2 ranks in knowledge engineering. When you take sacred geometry, you select 2 metamagic feats that you currently do not have. When casting a spell, you can perform basically a lot of math to spontaneously apply the effects of either or both of these metamagic feats, as well as any other metamagic feats you have to the spell without expending a higher level spell slot. Using a feat in this way increased the spell's casting time to the casting time it would take if the character were a sorcerer or a bard. So generally speaking, our standard action spells will be full round actions. You can't throw quicken spell on this to cheaty face that. You can take the feat more than once, adding more metamagic feats as you go. When casting a spell using sacred geometry, you first determine the effective spell level of the modified spell you are attempting to cast. For the sake of this video, we will say a still silent magic missile, so an effective spell level of 3. This presumes we are capable of casting 3rd level spells, which makes the presumption we are at least a level 5 wizard. Since we are casting a level 3 spell, our prime constants, we're looking for 19, 23, or 29. We, a hypothetical level 5 wizard, would then roll 5d6. Presumably because we're trying to milk knowledge engineering for all it's worth because we're a sacred geometrist, I guess is the name of that. Then do some combination of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division upon the numbers rolled, which gives rise to one of the relevant prime constants. If you can make any of them, the spell takes effect with the declared metamagic effects, and you expend a spell slot of the unaltered spell's level. In this universe, we, a level 5 wizard, would have cast a magic missile as a full round action without saying anything or moving our body in a meaningful way, which obviously has a boatload of value for a level 1 spell. If you are unsuccessful, you fail to cast, the action used to cast the spell is lost, and that 1st level spell slot is used up. The DC of any concentration check to cast a spell affected by this feat uses the effective spell level used to determine the prime constants. So yeah, that's a lot, but it's a lot for a huge amount of value. In the rules text for Arithmancy, there is no, you must have sufficient caster level to cast the spell. So this is more or less, with a little bit of homework done in advance, spend a swift action for a teeny tiny, itsy bitsy, intensified spell. Sacred Geometry obviously has so much more value baked in. Still Silent was the off the top of my head. In a more evocation-y flavored example, we could say a maximized intensified magic missile, or something scarier like maximized intensified, say, fireball, while still burning a lower level spell slot. This saves your high level spells for, well, frankly, extra blasting for that actual maximized empowered fireball you prepped today, or higher level tech spells to pull you and or the party's butts out of the fire should something bad happen. The drawback is both of these feats either require an extensive amount of homework for like your whole spellbook every time you learn a new spell if you wish to alter it with Arithmancy, or a shit ton of math done at the table very quickly. But don't worry, my friends, I spent a lot of time thinking about this and I have a solution for how to get your Sacred Geometry done efficiently. Follow this link and you go to this calculator made by D20 Toolkit because they are wonderful people and have made this much, much easier to do. They've also done one for Arithmancy. If you don't feel like writing down your spells, you can just type it in. It will auto-calc the number. And in the case of Sacred Geometry, there's literally an Android app for it. It's dope. But the thing about calculators, friends, is they help Tommy, who's not so good at math, do math good. And so I played around with this, and in both cases, there comes a point in time for Arithmancy and Sacred Geometry that you simply cannot fail to land on the thing that you need. In the case of Arithmancy, you would only ever be shooting at an absolute maximum of a DC 28. You're probably shooting much lower at the spellcraft check in question. Something as simple as skill-focused spellcraft tacked onto your character, max ranks in spellcraft, you're int-based, I bet you had them. I further bet you were putting them there anyway. And keeping your intelligence scaling means that at some point when all of this falls in based on your point buy and gold and so on, you literally can't fail, and in Pathfinder 1e, a natural 1 does not indicate the automatic failure of a skill check. Sacred Geometry, it's the same logic. To quickly generate something, if I wish to cast a Still Silent Magic Missile, an effective spell level of 3, and I'm rolling 5d6, we'll say I rolled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the wizard finds a 29 in 42 guesses, a 19 in 41 guesses, and a 19 this time in 10 guesses. The algorithm will almost always generate a solution unless you're just very low level and lack the requisite d6 to pull off something, which presents a weird moral quandary that I did not think I was going to run into in Sacred Geometry. There's not a limited number of times per day you can do this, and because there's a calculator, there's almost no downside to taking this feat that I have avoided desperately for years and years. It feels very much, seeing how good it is, like power attack for the fighter, just that's something you take. Honestly, it almost feels like the feat was made in bad taste, because it's like you either take this, use the calculator, have strict upside, or logically, you chose not to take this because you didn't want to subject you and your friends at the table to Sacred Geometry math, which is totally fair. But I cannot in good conscience say ban the calculator, because if you ban the calculator, you take almost all interest out of this feat as fast as popping a balloon with a needle, and further, if you ban the calculator for this, do you ban the person who uses a calculator in high-level Pathfinder when they're full attacking? I have several years experience at a physical table. I know one man who is able to generate math fast enough to not slow down the table without having to, at the very least, like count on their fingers. I feel so many different kinds of ways about this. I think the workaround is obviously, as with anything else, talk to your table. Hey, I'd like to take Sacred Geometry. Is it okay if I use the calculator? Here are the things I'm going to choose. Here, very openly, is the things my wizard can get up to if you allow me to take this, and then go from there. Certainly, I can think of a lot of people I've gamed with who just straight up need something to do to maintain their level of concentration when it is not their combat turn, and something like, okay, your turn's done, you probably have a rough estimate of what you're casting. as soon as you say I end turn, you roll for sacred geometry and start mathing. It's also very interesting flavor for, say, something like a Mystic Theurge of Bry or Cassandali or Abadar or any of the artifice flavored deities, or any deities associated with prophecy, fate, divination, and ultimately, if this is a tool to tell good stories, so much the better. And now that I've explained all of that, that is where we're going to call this video, because in fact, to then tack a build onto this would be the longest video in the world, and I think we'd all just pass out in the back snoring at the math I know I basically already have. So I'm going to take this opportunity to grab a bunch of weird mathy wizard shenanigans and jam them all together into one angry super wizard build. One more talk of mechanics after this, and then after that we'll have an actual build based on all of the things we've talked about today. What are those mechanics? What are those actual builds? Well, friends, that would be telling. You'll have to tune in next week for it. For now, we'll see you next time.